Today I'm going to answer 20 of the most common questions that we receive about MakerPipe and the connectors that we manufacture for building things out of EMT conduit. I've enlisted some help today. I've got my twin brother here. He's actually pretty cool.
What's
And you've never...
up? Hello, everybody.
Come on, man. I wasn't finished introducing you yet. They don't care about that. They just want to hear the questions and answers. Okay, yeah, you're probably right.
Right.
That's fair. Let's just get into it. You ask the questions and I'll answer them.
Somebody's a little bossy today.
How's that? Whatever. Just come on. Go with the first question.
All right, fine. First question, where are the connectors made?
No, that one's actually pretty easy. We make the connectors here in our shop in upstate South Carolina. I guess it's not technically here. It's a few doors down from me. But we're really proud to make the connectors here in America. And if you're familiar with upstate South Carolina, we're about an hour below Greenville in a town called Anderson.
Okay, cool, nice. Now, are the connectors plastic or metal?
So not only are the connectors made in America, and we're proud of that, but we use American steel and locally sourced materials. So our coder is close by, and we use local suppliers and vendors for most of the things that we make our connectors out of, which is the steel and then the plating and everything like that.
Okay, next question. Do you have to use power tools to build with the connectors and cut conduit, anything like that?
Nope, you don't need any power tools. While you can use, like a portable bandsaw or some kind of power saw to cut conduit to speed things up, it's really not necessary. You can use handheld tools like the pipe and tube cutter to cut conduit, and then you can use a 5mm simple Allen key to put the connectors together.
Yeah, easy enough that you could do it. Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Next question is, are all of the pipes necessary in a connector? Do I have to use them exactly the way that you have them pictured?
Yes, so all the pipes are necessary in a connector. For example, if you're using a 90-degree connector and you want to leave out the middle pipe and just do the two outer pipes, it's really not recommended because, especially with that connector, the way it's designed, that middle pipe gets clamped down first, and then the two outer pipes clamp down securely because of that middle pipe, so it really is necessary.
Good to know. Now, since I have to use all the pipes in a connection, do you actually sell pipes?
That's a good question. You might assume because MakerPipe, pipe is in the name, we actually don't sell any pipes or tubes. We just make connectors and accessories so you can utilize off-the-shelf materials like EMT conduit for DIY builds.
What about MakerPipe? Can we get it locally in stores?
Not yet. I say yet because that'd be great. We'd love to be in hardware stores or in home improvement stores, eventually. But, as of right now, we have a small team of about 7 here in South Carolina, and we're making parts here and shipping out of our shop. And we'd love to be in stores one day and make it more convenient for you guys to be able to get connectors and things locally. But as of right now, we ship directly from our shop in South Carolina. And hey, if you have a hookup with Home Depot or Ace Hardware, Menards, any of those places, reach out to us.
All right, moving on. Are the connector pieces supposed to splay apart when you're making connections?
Yes, so when you put a connector together, we suggest, if it's possible, to kind of loosely put it together and then put it in place where it's going to be on the pipe, and then use a clamp or something to kind of hold it there while you put in the pipes and assemble it. And you might notice that when you start tightening down, like I said, with a 90-degree connector, if you're tightening down the two bolts and the two halves of the connector start to splay apart, that's perfectly normal. As you continue to tighten down the nuts and bolts, they will close up and secure the pipes inside the connector.
Okay, now what about whenever you're making the connection? Do you actually have to drill through the pipe to be able to connect it? Does the bolt run through the pipe?
We have a lot of pictures of the connectors fully assembled, but at first glance, you might not realize how they work or how the pipes go through them. So the connectors, some of them have through pipes, like the 90-degree connector. That middle connection is a through pipe, and then the two outer sides are terminating pipes, we call them, because they terminate inside the connector. So you don't have to drill through the pipe. It's just all friction-based, and the clamps just clamp around the pipes that you're connecting.
Okay, now next question. I know that you love electrical conduit, but can you use other pipes and tubes with the connectors?
That's a good question. Sometimes EMT conduit, even though it's pretty inexpensive for what it is and for how much you get, you might want to use a less expensive pipe like PVC, or you want to use something more rigid like galvanized plumbing pipe. And we've done some experimentation and we've done some videos on different pipes and tubes that you can adapt to the connectors. So yes, you can use some other pipes and tubes. You just have to be wary of the outer diameter of what the connectors are designed for, which is different sizes of EMT conduit and now top rail. And then you have to compare the pipe that you want to use and compare that outer diameter with EMT conduit and then shim the gap accordingly.
That's pretty cool. Now, what size is the hardware?
So the hardware is metric. It's M6 by 1 It's 25 millimeters long, and of course there's an M6 nut as well. And we use the same hardware for the 3/4 inch EMT connectors, the 1-inch EMT connectors, and now the top rail connector. Cool. Now the next question is kind of a two-parter because they're along the same lines. But are the silver connectors, are they raw steel? Some people have assumed because we have black connectors available and silver connectors available that the black connector is, coated and corrosion resistant, and the silver one is raw steel. But they both go through a similar corrosion resistant bath, and then they're coated. The black one is e-coated, and the silver one goes through a zinc coating process. And do any of the connectors rust? Nothing is rust proof. If you scratch the connectors or if they get dinged up during assembly and things like that, then they're going to rust over time in those spots that they get scratched. But out of the box, they should be corrosion resistant and do pretty well outside. And we've noticed some fading in the black paint over time, but other than that, they hold up pretty well outside in the elements. Okay, next question is, can you shim up the connectors? So can you use a larger pipe than what it's designed for? So you can't actually go up in size with the connectors, you can only go down. So as we mentioned, you can use other pipes and tubes with the connectors, but you have to kind of compare the outer diameter. If it's larger than the outer diameter of the tube it's designed for, then it won't work. You can only kind of shim down the connectors. You can't go up in size with the connectors. Okay, now I noticed on the connectors, some of the connections have kind of this weird looking band thing on it. What are the friction bands used for? So the friction bands, you'll notice on some of the through pipe connections, on some of them, that there is a friction band, and that just adds extra grip to those through pipe connections. As I said earlier, the way it's designed is, those through pipe connections are usually what's tightened first, and that friction band just kind of helps that, and then helps the connector kind of close up on the rest of the pipes as well. So they're already installed on the connectors when you order them, but if you ever need to replace them, you can buy extra bags on the website, and they're pretty inexpensive, and they just slide over the connector, and then you heat them up and secure them that way. All right, earlier you said I don't have to use power tools, so how do I actually cut conduit? So to cut conduit, the easiest way is to use a handheld pipe and tube cutter. It just kind of rotates and clamps down on the pipe, and then you spin it around over and over again while simultaneously tightening every couple of turns, and eventually you cut through it. It's really easy to do, doesn't require power, but if you do want to use power tools, as we mentioned earlier, you can use a portable bandsaw, and we actually did a full video roundup of all sorts of different methods that you can use for cutting. I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. Okay, and kind of similar to that question, what tools do you need to assemble the connectors? Oh yeah, you just need a 5mm hex wrench to assemble the connectors. And just like with the cutter roundup, we did a complete roundup of different hex wrench options. You can check that out in the description as well and see which one might work best for your specific build. Nice. And so when I'm using that 5mm hex wrench and I'm tightening down the connectors, are the pieces supposed to touch when it's fully assembled and tightened? You might assume that the connector pieces are supposed to touch when they're fully tightened, and especially if you loosely connect everything together without pipes in the connectors, you might be like, oh, well, that makes sense, everything touches. But when you actually tighten them down fully, you want to make sure if there's multiple bolts in the connector, you go back evenly back and forth, and eventually that gap will be similar all the way around, but they'll never touch. Next question, can I paint the connectors? Yep, so if we don't have a color, like if we're out of black or something and you want to paint the connectors, you can totally do that. Both the silver and the black coating, they accept paint really well. And we actually did a full video on the best methods for that. And I'll link that down below, as well as a tutorial on painting conduit as well, if you want to just add some customization to your pipe builds or change the color of the connectors and conduit. But yes, you can paint the conduit and the connectors, and they do well with that. Okay, sweet. Now next, what size conduit should I use for my build? Wow, it's a good question, but kind of tough to answer quickly. Everybody's build is different, so I can't give a definitive answer on which size you should use. But basically, just think about how big the structure is going to be. If it's going to be 60 foot long and it's going to need to hold 500 pounds, then maybe 1/2 inch isn't the best option. And something too to consider is maybe you can use 1/2 inch EMT to support 500 pounds, but you're going to have to add verticals every maybe 1 or 2 feet. You're going to have 45-degree bracing in there, and just a ton more support than maybe 3/4 or 1 inch. So you also have to think about cost in terms of how much more bracing is it going to need, what's going to be more conduit that you have to get, and more connectors to add those braces. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're considering different materials. But I think it's really helpful to look in the community, see what builders have made and what size conduit they've used, and you can see what they've made and get an expectation and an idea of what to expect from the materials. And we've also done the video round up on the different strength testing that we did a while back on a 5-foot structure, and that could be helpful to you as well. I'll link that down below. But yeah, just think about your build and the overall design constraints and how much weight you need it to hold, and just think about bracing and things like that. All right, we finally made it to the end. Last question, are the connectors reusable? Yes, so they're designed to be taken apart and reused over and over again. It's just a 5mm hex wrench to assemble them and to take them apart, and you can reuse them time and time again. Like I said earlier, you might ding them up and scratch them in that process, and they might develop rust spots because of that, but you can reuse them, and we found it helpful to add like clear nail polish over spots that get dinged up, or you can repaint the connectors to kind of prevent that corrosion from happening. But you can reuse them over and over again, and that's kind of how they're designed, and it's meant to be modular. So even if you're not reusing them, but you built something that you want to change or you want to add to later, it's kind of why they're designed in the way that they are, usually in multiple pieces, or I guess always in multiple pieces, so you can walk up and add a connector or change it. But yes, you can reuse them over and over again. All right, well said. Hopefully you learned something new, and if we didn't answer a specific question that you have, definitely leave them down below in the comments. We'll be happy to answer it and maybe do a follow-up video in the future. But thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.